The first time anyone approaches the mansion, its sheer size is overwhelming. Looming over the countryside, its weathered stone walls seem to absorb the light, casting long shadows across the cracked driveway. Windows, many darkened with years of dust, reflect the gray sky like eyes that watch silently. Even from a distance, there is a sense of unease, a magnetic pull that draws the curious while warning them to stay away. Locals speak of the estate in hushed tones, their eyes darting nervously whenever the conversation drifts toward it. Some say it is cursed, others insist it is haunted, but everyone agrees on one detail that sets this mansion apart: every single mirror inside is nailed face down to the walls. The legend begins with the first visitors, who describe a silence so thick it seems to press against their eardrums. Not the quiet of nature, but something deliberate, something waiting. The floors creak underfoot, but no wind rustles the curtains, no animals scurry through the hallways. And then there is the mirrors, hundreds of them, scattered across the mansion's rooms, large and small, ornate and simple, all turned away from the eyes of anyone who dares enter. The effect is unnerving. Walls lined with mirrors should create space, reflect light, offer clarity. Here, they do the opposite. They feel like traps, like unseen observers holding back their gaze, hiding something just out of reach. Even the first steps inside unsettle the visitor. The air is thick with a damp, metallic scent, as if the house itself is bleeding. Dust motes hang motionless, refracting light in ways that seem almost deliberate, teasing glimpses of movement where there is none. Each room feels like a stage set for an unseen play, where every object is placed with meticulous intent. The furniture is old but preserved, as though someone had frozen the house in time. Portraits stare down with unblinking eyes, but the mirrors seem alive in a different way, waiting, patient, as though aware of every heartbeat that dares intrude upon their domain. Stories circulate about what happens when someone dares to peek at one of the hidden reflections. The earliest accounts are vague, almost polite in their restraint, describing feelings of dizziness, vertigo, or sudden, inexplicable chills. Later reports are darker, more personal, whispers of shadows moving independently, of figures that linger at the edge of vision, visible only when the observer is alone. One former caretaker, who requested anonymity, admitted he could never explain the panic he felt each time he walked past the hallway of mirrors. "It's as if they remember you," he said quietly, staring at the floor. "And some part of you never leaves." Outside, the mansion continues to dominate the landscape, and at night it becomes something else entirely. Locals claim they can see shapes moving behind the covered glass, even when the interior is supposedly empty. Cars slow down at the gates, people cross themselves when they pass by, and children are warned never to go near. The mansion's reputation has grown with each generation, fueled by whispered rumors, fleeting glimpses of curtains moving, and unexplained noises that echo across the empty estate. And yet, despite the fear, the mansion draws people in. Investigators, thrill-seekers, and curious wanderers are pulled toward its gates, compelled to discover the truth for themselves. They arrive with flashlights and cameras, journals and skepticism, determined to see for themselves what lies behind the mirrors nailed to the walls. Every visitor leaves changed, carrying fragments of a story too strange, too unsettling to ignore. And so the question hangs in the air, unanswered but insistent: why would anyone cover every reflective surface, leaving nothing to catch the light but darkness? The locals, however, have a simpler way of putting it. They refuse to enter after sunset. "The mirrors watch you back," they whisper. And in that warning is a promise, or perhaps a threat, that not all reflections are innocent, and not all secrets are meant to be seen. The mansion was not always a place of fear. It began as the grand vision of a man whose ambition was only rivaled by his secrecy. His name was Edward Blackwood, a wealthy industrialist in the late 19th century, known in public circles as a philanthropist and a patron of the arts. At social gatherings, he was charming and meticulous, always impeccably dressed, with a smile that suggested both warmth and calculation. Yet behind the polished exterior, Edward's private life was an enigma, marked by obsessive routines, late-night wanderings through the halls of his mansion, and a growing fascination with mirrors. Friends who visited occasionally remarked on his peculiar habit of pausing in front of them, as though they held the answers to questions no one else could even imagine. Edward's fascination with mirrors was not born from vanity. Letters discovered decades later reveal that he believed mirrors were portals of a different kind, gateways that could capture and contain not just images, but moments of the soul. He wrote extensively about reflection and memory, often referring to mirrors as silent witnesses that could observe what humans could not. At the time, many of these ideas were dismissed as eccentric musings of a wealthy recluse. Yet, when viewed alongside the mansion itself, a chilling picture emerges: rooms meticulously arranged so that every reflective surface could be controlled, every angle observed, every shadow manipulated. Despite his wealth and influence, Edward was not a man without personal demons. Historians who have studied his life suggest that he was consumed by the loss of his wife, Helena, who died under mysterious circumstances shortly after the completion of the mansion. Accounts vary: some say she succumbed to illness, others whisper of an accident, and a few hint at darker possibilities. Letters found in Edward's private collection reveal a man grappling with grief and guilt, obsessed with preserving her presence through objects and spaces within the house. It is perhaps no coincidence that, shortly after her death, he began a systematic project of covering mirrors, ostensibly to prevent unwanted reflections, but in reality to maintain control over what remained unseen. Edward's staff, many of whom remained loyal for years, recall his peculiar rituals. He would pace the long hallways late at night, muttering to himself while inspecting the mirrors. The maids and butlers described rooms where he had marked measurements on the floor and walls, as though mapping some invisible architecture. Journal entries and accounts from trusted friends hint at a man teetering between obsession and paranoia. One butler noted that Edward once instructed him to nail mirrors face down after reporting, with unwavering seriousness, that the walls remember everything. The phrase was repeated often, almost like a warning to anyone who might question the order. Yet Edward was not universally feared during his lifetime. He was capable of charm and generosity, hosting elaborate parties in the mansion's great hall, where chandeliers sparkled and mirrors reflected dazzling candlelight. Guests would marvel at the architectural design, the elegance of the interiors, and the way light seemed to dance across every surface. Few suspected the darker undertones that lay beneath the grandeur. Even after Helena's death, Edward maintained a facade of normalcy, inviting neighbors and dignitaries to admire the house's beauty, all while continuing his private work, carefully documenting every change, every placement, every mirror turned away. One particularly revealing aspect of Edward's journals is his fixation on observation. He writes about the human tendency to lie, to mask fear, and to deceive oneself. Mirrors, he claimed, could not lie. They would bear witness to the truth, recording the faintest tremor of guilt or the subtlest flash of fear. Over time, this philosophy seems to have escalated into a compulsion. Not only did he cover the mirrors, but he also documented every room meticulously, leaving behind a blueprint that was as much a psychological map as it was an architectural plan. Each mirror nailed to the wall was a deliberate choice, a silent statement of control, of fear, or perhaps of a desire to trap something that should never escape. The more scholars and investigators have examined Edward's life, the more he appears to be a man both brilliant and unhinged, a figure whose intentions are impossible to untangle completely. Was he merely obsessed with controlling reflections, or was there something more sinister at play? Some historians point to his writings on capturing the essence of a person within reflective surfaces, suggesting that Edward believed mirrors could imprison souls. Others argue that his grief over Helena's death, compounded by social isolation and immense wealth, pushed him toward psychological extremes. Whatever the truth, the mansion itself became an extension of Edward Blackwood's mind, a labyrinth of walls and mirrors designed to observe, contain, and perhaps haunt. By the time Edward passed away, the mansion was already steeped in mystery. His personal papers, many never fully catalogued, hinted at unfinished experiments and obsessions that no one outside the household could comprehend. The mirrors, carefully nailed and angled, remained untouched in their silence, waiting to reveal or conceal the secrets Edward had left behind. For decades afterward, the estate would change hands, and yet the echoes of its first owner's peculiar fears lingered. Visitors would sense the weight of Edward's presence in every corridor, every darkened corner, and in every mirror turned away from sight. The question that haunts historians and thrill-seekers alike is simple yet profound: was Edward's work the act of a grieving, obsessive mind, or was he attempting to shield the world from something far darker than mirrors could ever reflect? Even now, standing before the mansion's towering facade, one cannot help but feel that Edward Blackwood is still watching, his intentions woven into the very walls, his secrets silently waiting to be discovered. The mansion's reputation as a place of dread only deepened with time, long after Edward Blackwood had vanished from the world. Those who dared to live within its walls often spoke of experiences that could not be rationalized, and in some cases, they simply disappeared, leaving nothing behind but rumors and unanswered questions. The first of these accounts dates to the early 20th century, when a young family rented the estate after it had been sold by the Blackwood heirs. Neighbors recall that the family seemed optimistic at first, excited by the grandeur of the mansion and its sprawling gardens. Yet it didn't take long for the subtle horrors to emerge. The father, a schoolteacher by trade, began reporting strange occurrences almost immediately. Doors would lock themselves, yet no key was ever turned. Footsteps echoed in the hallways when no one was home. At night, he claimed, the mirrors seemed to shift, tilting at angles that defied logic, reflecting hallways that should not exist. His wife, initially skeptical, began to notice objects moved or rearranged without explanation. But the children were the most affected. Neighbors later recounted that the young boy often refused to go near certain rooms, whispering about a man in the mirrors, who stared at him when no one else was around. The family endured weeks of escalating tension until one night, the mother vanished without a trace. Searches yielded no clues. The father and children left shortly afterward, never to return. Local authorities dismissed the disappearance as voluntary, but whispered accounts told a far darker story, that the mirrors themselves had somehow claimed her. As the decades passed, other residents followed a similar pattern. A caretaker employed in the 1940s reportedly went missing after claiming that he could hear conversations in the mirrors, voices repeating the fears and secrets of those who dared enter. A wealthy heiress rented the mansion in the 1960s and insisted that the mirrors displayed things she had never done, images of acts she had no memory of committing. She fled in the dead of night, leaving behind her personal belongings, too terrified to ever speak publicly of what she had seen. Each story added to the mansion's growing infamy, creating an almost magnetic reputation, a place both alluring and forbidden, where the brave and curious often paid with their sanity, or their lives. Eyewitness accounts are inconsistent, but certain details repeat with uncanny similarity. People speak of shadows flickering across mirrors, of reflections that do not match the body in front of them, and of sudden chills that descend without warning. Some claim that the mirrors whisper to those who listen, recounting secrets they themselves had never revealed. These reports are accompanied by tangible traces, objects displaced, locks tampered with, faint scratches along the frames of the mirrors, and in a few cases, faint handprints etched into the glass as if someone, or something, was trapped just beneath the surface. Investigators have struggled to separate legend from reality, but the patterns remain undeniable. The mansion has a history of residents disappearing under mysterious circumstances. Perhaps the most disturbing account involves a young maid who served the mansion in the 1970s. She claimed that while dusting the upper hallways, she glimpsed her reflection in a mirror that should have been nailed down. But the reflection that stared back was not her own, it was distorted, pale, and twisting in ways impossible for human features. Terrified, she dropped her dusting cloth and fled the house, only to return the next day and find the same mirror intact, as if nothing had happened. Later, she confessed that for weeks afterward, she would see the same distorted face in mirrors in other locations, restaurants, shops, even her own home. "It followed me," she said, voice trembling. "And I don't think it ever stopped." Whether her experience was psychological or something more sinister is impossible to verify, but the story solidified the mansion's reputation as a place where the line between reality and reflection blurred dangerously. Newspaper archives offer another layer of intrigue. In 1983, an article briefly mentioned a historian who had spent several nights cataloging the mirrors in the house. He described the layout with meticulous detail, noting peculiar angles and overlapping reflections. His notes suggest that some mirrors reflected empty hallways where no doors existed, and others seemed to show rooms long sealed. The historian disappeared shortly after submitting his report. Authorities found his notebook in a locked desk drawer, pages intact, but he was nowhere to be found. Those who knew him claim he was fascinated by the mansion, obsessed with understanding Edward Blackwood's mind, but the obsession may have cost him everything. Even casual visitors report unnerving experiences. Tourists or trespassers claim to hear faint voices calling their names, to feel sudden drops in temperature, or to glimpse figures in the corner of their vision. Some insist that the mirrors show moments from the past, snippets of events they could not have known. Others insist they see themselves differently, distorted, as if the mirror perceives a truth hidden from the person staring back. Each of these tales, fragmentary as they are, contributes to the mansion's living legend, a place that seems aware of who enters, and perhaps, aware of who should never leave. By cataloging these disappearances, a disturbing pattern emerges: the longer someone stays in the mansion, the more likely they are to experience phenomena that defy explanation. Fear escalates, behavior becomes erratic, and eventually, people vanish or flee, leaving only stories behind. Over time, these tales intertwine, creating a psychological labyrinth almost as intricate as the mansion itself. It is no longer just a building, it is a repository of dread, a silent witness to the suffering and confusion of those who dared to reside within its walls. And yet, despite all the disappearances, the mansion remains standing, mirrors intact, waiting. Each story, each missing person, serves as a warning, and as an invitation. Those who come seeking answers are drawn into a narrative that refuses to release them, a story that refuses to end. The question lingers: is the mansion itself responsible for these vanishings, or are the mirrors simply a reflection of the human mind when confronted with something it cannot comprehend? Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: anyone who enters must reckon with the possibility that they, too, may become a tale whispered by the locals, another chapter in the mansion's long, dark history. The mirrors in the mansion are unlike any ordinary reflective surfaces. Each one carries a presence, an unsettling weight that seems to distort the very air around it. Some are small, delicate, and gilded with intricate patterns; others are massive, stretching from floor to ceiling, their frames carved with symbols that hint at origins long forgotten. Collectively, they dominate the mansion, creating an atmosphere where every glance, every shadow, becomes a question rather than a simple reflection. Their purpose, or perhaps their curse, remains a mystery, one that has puzzled historians, psychologists, and paranormal investigators alike. What makes these mirrors particularly sinister is their history. Records suggest that Edward Blackwood imported several of them from Europe, purchasing them from obscure antiquarians and private collectors. Many date back centuries, with some rumored to have been part of noble estates where strange rituals were practiced. Legends claim these mirrors were believed to capture not only the image of whoever looked into them but also fragments of their soul. While these claims sound fantastical, the craftsmanship is undeniable. The glass is unnervingly clear, almost unnaturally so, and the frames carry intricate designs that seem to shift subtly under different angles of light. In the dim corridors of the mansion, these mirrors appear to breathe, reflecting more than the simple geometry of walls and furniture; they reflect fear itself. Visitors often describe the mirrors as watching them. It is not metaphorical; there is a tangible, almost sentient quality to their presence. Rooms that should feel open seem constricted, the ceilings lower, the corners darker, simply because of the way the mirrors are positioned. In some cases, they reflect spaces that are not physically there, creating illusions of hallways or doors. Investigators note that some mirrors seem to refuse reflection altogether, capturing only darkness, as though they have absorbed the light around them. Others appear to shift images, showing people in poses they had not assumed or moments from days they cannot remember. These phenomena, consistent across decades of accounts, suggest that the mirrors are more than objects, they are active participants in the mansion's unsettling narrative. Even the act of nailing them face down adds to the fear. It is one thing to have mirrors in a room, it is another to force them to turn away from human eyes, their reflective power suppressed, yet still present. Why did Edward Blackwood insist on this practice? Some historians argue it was a form of control, a method to contain whatever the mirrors might reveal. Others suggest it was a protective ritual, intended to prevent the spirits or energies he believed lingered in the glass from escaping. Those who have studied his journals point to an obsession with observation and concealment, a philosophy that the mirrors themselves were not merely reflective but transformative, capable of shaping the reality of those who dared to stare into them. The design of the mirrors contributes to their eerie effect. Many feature convex or concave surfaces that distort reflections, producing images that are slightly elongated, compressed, or warped. When combined with the dim lighting and the angles of the rooms, this distortion can trick even the most rational observer, creating a sense that someone, or something, is standing just out of view. Small details, like smudges, scratches, or imperfections in the glass, appear intentionally placed, as if the mirrors have been carefully trained over time. Some investigators believe that Edward manipulated the mirrors' positions to amplify psychological tension, forcing residents to confront themselves in ways that destabilize their perception of reality. There are accounts of mirrors interacting with those who approach them. A visiting historian once reported that as he leaned close to inspect a gilded frame, he felt a sudden heat behind him, though no one else was present. A night guard in the 1980s swore he saw a figure in a mirror raise its hand even as he remained still. The patterns are subtle, often dismissed as tricks of the light, yet the sheer volume of consistent reports across decades suggests something more profound. Each mirror becomes a character, an active witness to the mansion's history of fear, obsession, and disappearance. Perhaps the most unsettling detail is that the mirror's placement seems deliberate, almost ritualistic. They are not randomly nailed to the walls, each angle, each room, each position appears calculated to maximize unease, to distort perception, and to control what is seen, and what is hidden. Visitors describe the sensation of being observed not only by the mirrors themselves but by the spaces they reflect, creating a psychological labyrinth from which there seems to be no escape. In the mansion, mirrors do not merely show what is in front of them, they reveal what lies beneath, within, and perhaps beyond the human mind. One mirror, still intact in the West Wing, is said to have shattered spontaneously in the 1920s, leaving behind jagged shards and a cryptic red smudge along the wall. No explanation was ever found. Others have reported that some mirrors occasionally emit faint reflections of people long dead, figures from Edward Blackwood's era who seem frozen in a moment of fear or surprise. These are not reflections of the present, they are echoes, as though the glass has trapped fragments of history and continues to replay them endlessly. By the time a visitor fully understands the mirrors, the fear is almost unbearable. They are not simply glass and frame, they are vessels of tension, history, and mystery. Each one holds a secret, a story, and perhaps a warning. And as each visitor moves through the mansion, the question lingers, are the mirrors a reflection of what is in the mansion, or of what lies hidden in those who dare to enter? The uncertainty leaves an indelible mark, and by the time one exits, the memory of those mirrors is impossible to shake. The mansion's mirrors do more than distort reality, they have become the focal point of legends and paranormal speculation that have persisted for generations. Local townsfolk speak in hushed tones, sharing stories that blur the line between myth and lived experience. It is said that even those who have never entered the estate are affected by its presence, sensing an intangible weight when passing nearby, a chill in the air that seems to cling to the skin and whisper in a language just beyond comprehension. These tales, repeated for decades, have transformed the mansion from an architectural oddity into a locus of fear and fascination, a place where folklore and reality collide. One common legend involves the watchers in the glass, spirits or entities believed to inhabit the mirrors themselves. According to locals, these watchers are bound to the estate by Edward Blackwood's obsession, unable or unwilling to move on. Witnesses report glimpsing figures that vanish the moment one blinks, reflections of people who were never present in the room, or even distorted faces that stare from angles impossible for the observer to occupy. Psychics and paranormal investigators have attempted to document these phenomena with varying methods: thermal cameras, electromagnetic sensors, and night vision equipment, often reporting anomalies that defy logical explanation. Even skeptics find themselves unnerved, noting a consistent sense of being observed despite empty rooms. Stories of auditory anomalies accompany the visual phenomena. Visitors speak of faint whispers that seem to echo from the mirrors themselves, voices repeating fragments of conversation or unintelligible phrases that chill the bone. Some report hearing footsteps following them down hallways where no one else is present. One paranormal investigator described entering the mansion at night only to hear the sound of doors creaking in rooms above, though every upper-level room had been sealed for years. Others insist they have heard names being called, sometimes their own, other times those of individuals long deceased. In every account, the mirrors are central, as if they amplify or carry these echoes of the past, linking the present moment to events that should have been confined to memory. The legends also encompass more sinister rituals. Some local historians suggest that Edward Blackwood's obsession with mirrors may have been influenced by arcane European practices, where reflective surfaces were believed to hold spiritual energy, trap wandering souls, or even allow communication with the dead. Fragments of his journals lend credence to this theory, describing methods for capturing essence through reflection, notes on angles and light, and cryptic references to controlling what the mirrors saw. The parallels between these historical practices and the phenomena reported in the mansion suggest that Edward's work may have extended beyond mere superstition or grief. He may have been attempting something far more profound and terrifying. The paranormal reputation is reinforced by seemingly inexplicable physical occurrences. Visitors report doors slamming without wind, objects subtly moving, and sudden drops in temperature. Some claim to feel invisible hands on their shoulders or to sense a presence just behind them. More disturbingly, many describe feeling emotions that do not belong to them, grief, terror, or rage, when standing near specific mirrors. These experiences create an atmosphere where reality feels tenuous, and time itself seems to warp, bending perception in ways that cannot be accounted for scientifically. For many, the mansion becomes less a building and more a living entity, one that reacts, observes, and perhaps even manipulates those who enter. Certain mirrors are singled out in local legends as particularly malevolent. The West Wing mirror, for example, is said to show visions of the future, or at least a future shaped by fear. Witnesses describe seeing themselves in moments of danger or despair, images so vivid they provoke physical reactions, yet vanish upon closer inspection. Another mirror, located in what was Edward Blackwood's private study, is rumored to display the presence of the original owner himself, standing silently behind observers, watching their every move. Those who have glimpsed these reflections often speak of a lingering feeling, a shadow that follows them even outside the mansion, a sense that something escaped the glass to accompany them into the real world. The local community, despite their fear, is deeply invested in these stories. Older generations pass them down, embellishing details, warning children never to venture near the gates after dark. Occasional thrill-seekers or investigators arrive, drawn by the legend, only to leave shaken or silent, carrying fragments of the mansion's mysteries with them. Some return to write books, produce documentaries, or create investigative reports, but each account adds to the web of myth, fact, and speculation. The mansion becomes a mirror itself, reflecting the collective imagination, anxieties, and obsessions of every person who attempts to understand it. Even skeptics concede that the mansion possesses an uncanny quality. It is not merely the architecture, the age of the mirrors, or the historical anecdotes that create fear, it is the cumulative weight of centuries of observation, obsession, and disappearance. Each mirror holds the memory of those who lived, suffered, or vanished within the walls, carrying echoes of the past into the present. In this sense, the mansion is less a structure and more a vessel of collective dread, a place where folklore and history intertwine, creating phenomena that continue to captivate, terrify, and baffle all who encounter it. As night falls over the estate, the mansion seems to settle into its own rhythm. Windows catch the moonlight, walls cast impossibly long shadows, and the mirrors, nailed to the walls, refusing to reflect, still hold secrets. For the curious, the brave, or the foolish, the mansion offers a single, unspoken warning: the past is never truly gone, and those who enter may find themselves reflected in ways they never anticipated. The whispers persist, the shadows linger, and the question remains: are these phenomena mere superstition, the product of fear and imagination, or is the mansion itself alive, its mirrors a gateway to something far darker than anyone has dared to confront? Decades of whispered legends and unexplained occurrences eventually attracted those determined to separate fact from fiction. The mansion, shrouded in its history of obsession and fear, became a magnet for investigators, paranormal researchers, historians, psychologists, and skeptics alike. Each approached the estate with a different goal. Some sought to validate the paranormal claims, others aimed to expose them as superstition, and a few were driven purely by curiosity, unable to resist the lure of the unknown. What united them all was an awareness that the mansion was not a place where ordinary rules applied. It demanded vigilance, attention, and caution, for the mirrors did not merely reflect, they recorded, observed, and, some believed, judged. The first wave of investigators in the mid-20th century faced immediate challenges. The mansion's sprawling layout, combined with decades of neglect, made exploration difficult. Dusty corridors, crumbling staircases, and rooms frozen in time created a labyrinthine environment. Yet even before stepping inside, many reported a palpable sense of unease. Cameras malfunctioned, compasses spun erratically, and some experienced sudden, inexplicable fatigue upon entering the estate. It quickly became apparent that the mansion resisted casual observation. It was a place where the normal laws of perception seemed altered, and where every reflection, every darkened surface, carried the weight of centuries. Early investigators documented the mirrors meticulously. They measured angles, catalogued frames, and photographed every reflective surface, seeking patterns or anomalies. Yet these objective methods often yielded more questions than answers. Some mirrors, when photographed, appeared to display faint images of people who were not present, or hallways that did not exist. Others reflected rooms correctly but captured shadows moving independently of any occupant. The investigators, trained to rely on evidence and logic, found themselves confronting phenomena that defied explanation, forcing them to acknowledge the possibility that the mansion operated according to rules beyond human comprehension. Human psychology quickly became a focus. Investigators noted the mansion's profound effect on residents and visitors alike. Fear and anxiety seemed to intensify as individuals moved from room to room. Skeptics initially dismissed reports of whispers, shifting shadows, and distorted reflections as products of stress, fatigue, or the mind's tendency to find patterns in randomness. Yet even the most rational minds reported experiences that challenged their skepticism. A seasoned detective, known for debunking hauntings, admitted that after a single night in the mansion, he could not explain the sensation of being followed, observed, or studied by unseen eyes. The mirrors, he confessed privately, seemed to hold a consciousness of their own. Investigators also began interviewing former residents and staff, seeking first-hand accounts of strange occurrences. The stories were consistent: doors locking on their own, footsteps echoing without source, objects disappearing and reappearing, and, above all, the unsettling presence of the mirrors. Some described the mirrors as almost predatory, their reflections exaggerated, distorted, or warped in ways that induced panic. One historian reported that after spending several hours in the West Wing, he felt as though the mirrors were studying him, registering his fears and anxieties with an awareness that went beyond mere observation. These accounts blurred the line between psychological suggestion and objective experience, deepening the mystery surrounding the mansion. Despite their training and experience, investigators often felt personal unease. Many admitted that the mansion affected them emotionally, amplifying latent fears or resurfacing memories long suppressed. One researcher confessed that after weeks of observation, he began to question his own sanity, waking in the middle of the night to the sensation of being watched. Another reported seeing fleeting images of people long dead reflected in mirrors that had no logical connection to the space. The mansion, it seemed, had a way of turning curiosity into obsession, of drawing investigators into its narrative, making them unwilling participants in its ongoing story. Among the investigators, a few adopted extreme measures. Paranormal teams installed cameras, motion detectors, and audio recorders in hopes of capturing evidence of unseen activity. Some recorded faint anomalies, shadows that moved independently, whispers recorded on empty tapes, and figures that appeared only in reflective surfaces. Skeptics challenged these findings, citing technical errors, environmental factors, or psychological suggestion. Yet when cross-referenced with historical accounts and multiple independent sources, a chilling pattern emerged. The mansion's mirrors were central to nearly every reported anomaly, suggesting they were more than passive objects. They were catalysts, amplifying and perhaps even directing the experiences of those within the estate. Investigators also uncovered previously hidden artifacts. Behind walls, under floorboards, and in sealed rooms, they discovered letters, journals, and notes from Edward Blackwood himself. These writings were cryptic, blending grief, obsession, and paranoia. One letter warned, "Do not look too long, for the walls remember and the mirrors speak." Another instructed that mirrors should be nailed face down to prevent them from releasing what they had absorbed. These artifacts provided insight into Edward's state of mind and motivations, but they also reinforced the sense that the mansion was designed to manipulate perception, control fear, and perhaps even ensnare those who dared enter. The investigators' experiences culminated in a growing realization: the mansion was not merely a building, nor the mirrors simple objects. It was an ecosystem of fear and observation, where human psychology, architectural design, and historical obsession intersected. Every decision, from mirror placement to room layout, seemed intended to challenge perception, provoke anxiety, and leave visitors questioning the very nature of reality. By the time the investigators left, exhausted and unnerved, they carried with them a singular truth: the mansion's mysteries were far from solved, and the mirrors were central to a narrative that spanned decades of disappearances, legends, and inexplicable phenomena. Even skeptics, once determined to debunk the stories, admitted privately that the mansion left them changed. The mirrors had an undeniable effect, one that lingered long after the investigators departed. The estate was no longer simply a subject of curiosity, it was a force, capable of drawing even the most rational minds into its web. And as the investigators reviewed their notes, footage, and interviews, one question remained unresolved: what exactly were the mirrors recording, and what would happen to anyone who looked too closely? It was a stormy night, one that seemed to press the sky down upon the mansion itself, when the estate earned a new chapter in its dark history. The wind howled across the fields, rattling shutters and bending the skeletal trees that surrounded the property. Lightning cast stark, fleeting illumination across the towering facade, revealing every gnarled detail of stone and wood, as though exposing the house's secrets in sudden, violent flashes. Inside, the corridors were alive with creaks and groans, each room echoing with the weight of decades of fear and obsession. It was on this night that a family, renting the mansion for the first time in over a generation, became the unwilling actors in what would later be described as the mansion's darkest event. The father, a university professor with a penchant for rationality, had dismissed the warnings of locals as mere superstition. He had read the historical accounts, noted the disappearances, and assured his family that logic and science would reveal the truth. Yet within hours of arrival, even he began to feel the oppressive atmosphere, the way the house seemed to bend perception, making hallways longer than they should be and rooms narrower. The mirrors, carefully nailed face down, exuded a subtle malevolence. Though they did not reflect directly, the sense of being observed was unavoidable, pressing upon every member of the family in different, insidious ways. The first anomaly occurred in the grand hall. The mother, arranging furniture for the family's stay, noticed a mirror partially dislodged from the wall, a rare exception in a mansion where every reflective surface was supposedly secured. As she leaned closer to adjust it, she claimed to see a fleeting figure in the glass, a man with hollow eyes standing silently behind her. She spun around, no one was there. The father attributed the sighting to nerves and shadows, but the children grew increasingly agitated, claiming that voices whispered their names from behind the mirrors. By midnight, fear had escalated into palpable terror. The air in the mansion was thick and heavy, as if saturated with the echoes of the past, pressing down on the family with an unseen weight. The climax of the night unfolded in the West Wing, a section rarely explored even by previous visitors. The family ventured there together, flashlights in hand, drawn by both curiosity and an inescapable sense of dread. One of the children pointed to a large, ornate mirror lying face up against the wall, an anomaly in a house designed to suppress reflections. The mirror's surface shimmered unnaturally, reflecting not the family, but a series of distorted images, fleeting glimpses of people long dead, rooms that did not exist, and shadows moving independently of the living. As the family watched in horror, the mirror seemed to pulse, as though alive, radiating tension and dread into the air. Panic ensued. The father attempted to remove the mirror, fearing some structural hazard, but it would not budge. The glass itself seemed to resist physical force, unnaturally heavy, almost sticky, as though the room, or the mirror itself, was bending the laws of reality. The mother screamed when the reflection shifted to show her, not herself, but a pale, hollow-eyed figure mimicking her movements with a grotesque delay. The children shrieked as shadows appeared along the hallway, seemingly independent of any light source, moving with intelligence and purpose. The house, long a silent observer, became an active participant in the unfolding terror, exploiting every psychological vulnerability, every flicker of fear, to manipulate its occupants. By the time dawn broke, the mansion had exacted a toll. The family emerged, physically unharmed but profoundly changed. The mother, previously composed, refused to speak of the events, trembling at the mere mention of mirrors. The father's rationality had cracked under the weight of experiences he could neither explain nor deny. The children were haunted, describing vivid dreams of figures in mirrors following them, even outside the mansion. Their departure was abrupt, leaving behind personal items and furniture in a haste that spoke of urgent, unexplainable fear. The townsfolk, observing from a distance, noted their pallor and the silence that enveloped them. The family had become part of the mansion's living legend. Investigators who later studied the event found anomalies in the structure itself. The West Wing's floorboards appeared worn in patterns inconsistent with normal use, and several mirrors were discovered slightly warped, their surfaces subtly bowed as though exerting pressure outward. Audio recordings from investigators who arrived after the family reported faint voices echoing through empty rooms, interspersed with low, rhythmic thumping. Visual footage captured fleeting glimpses of shadows moving independently of the occupants, and, most disturbing, one camera recorded the reflection of a figure not present in the room, a pale, hollow-eyed man resembling descriptions of Edward Blackwood himself. Psychologists analyzing the family's testimony noted common patterns: heightened perception of threat, altered spatial awareness, and acute responses to the mirrors themselves. The house had elicited fear responses that were physiologically measurable: rapid heart rates, sweating, and hypervigilance, but the subjective experiences went beyond any known psychological phenomenon. The combination of structural anomalies, mirrors, and psychological influence created a scenario where fear became tangible, almost a physical entity within the mansion. Local legend absorbed the story quickly. Newspapers reported it as a curiosity, but townsfolk shared details privately, embellishing and confirming the family's terror with their own stories. The event became a benchmark in the mansion's history, a concrete instance where the combination of mirrors, design, and obsession manifested in direct, terrifying interaction with humans. It was no longer merely a site of eerie tales, it was demonstrably dangerous, capable of destabilizing even the most rational minds and leaving permanent psychological scars. The mansion's darkest event, while shocking in its intensity, also reinforced the central mystery of the mirrors. Were they merely reflecting the fears of those who gazed upon them, or were they active participants, exploiting vulnerability and amplifying dread? Evidence suggested the latter. Every object, every reflective surface, every angle of the mansion appeared deliberately designed to manipulate perception and psychological state. The family had unwittingly walked into a carefully orchestrated environment where fear was amplified, recorded, and perhaps even preserved within the mirrors themselves. To this day, the event serves as both warning and puzzle. No full explanation exists, no theory can account for every phenomenon experienced that night. Investigators, historians, and paranormal enthusiasts revisit the story repeatedly, analyzing every detail for insight. Yet the mansion retains its secrets, guarding the full extent of that night's terror. The mirrors, as ever, remain central, silent witnesses and potential orchestrators of the experience. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the empty hallways, the question lingers in the minds of all who hear the story: could anyone survive an encounter with the mansion unscathed, or does every visitor leave a piece of themselves behind, captured forever by the mirrors that watch in silence? In the years following the mansion's darkest event, scholars, psychologists, and paranormal investigators attempted to piece together a coherent understanding of what had occurred. The challenge was immense. The mansion did not present a single anomaly, but a complex network of architectural, psychological, and historical factors that intertwined to create an environment where fear itself became tangible. Each mirror, each hallway, each shadow seemed to carry intentionality, as if the house had been designed not merely to house people but to manipulate them, observe them, and perhaps even shape their perception of reality. Historians delving into Edward Blackwood's life discovered that his obsession with mirrors was rooted in a combination of grief, intellectual curiosity, and an almost fanatical desire for control. Following his wife Helena's death, he reportedly turned inward, retreating from society and immersing himself in philosophical and arcane studies. His journals, preserved and studied by modern researchers, reveal a man fascinated by the human mind, by the interaction of light and reflection, and by the idea that a mirror could act as a repository of truth. To Edward, mirrors were not passive objects, they were instruments capable of capturing more than physical images. They could capture emotion, memory, and perhaps even a fragment of the soul itself. Psychologists analyzing reports from the mansion's numerous visitors began to identify patterns of perception and reaction. Prolonged exposure to the mirrors appeared to induce heightened states of anxiety, hallucinations, and dissociation. Individuals reported seeing things that were not physically present, hearing whispers from empty rooms, or experiencing a distorted sense of time and space. In some cases, entire memories seemed to surface or shift, creating confusion about what had actually occurred versus what had been perceived. This suggests that the mansion's design exploited the mind's susceptibility to suggestion, fear, and the uncanny. The mirrors, in essence, acted as catalysts, amplifying latent anxieties and projecting them back to the observer in forms both subtle and terrifying. One particularly compelling aspect of the mansion's influence involves spatial distortion. Architectural analysis shows that hallways, staircases, and rooms were designed in ways that subtly manipulate perception. Mirrors were positioned to create impossible angles, producing the illusion of corridors extending beyond physical constraints or rooms appearing larger or smaller than their true dimensions. Light was carefully managed, either naturally or through strategic placement of windows and reflective surfaces, to accentuate shadows and highlight movement where there was none. This architectural manipulation, combined with the psychological impact of the mirrors themselves, created a space where reality became malleable, and visitors could no longer trust their own senses. Historical context adds another layer to the puzzle. Edward Blackwood lived during a time when spiritualism, mesmerism, and occult practices were of growing interest among the educated elite. It is possible that his actions were influenced by these cultural currents, adopting the belief that mirrors could serve as conduits between the living and the dead, or as traps for spiritual entities. Contemporary accounts and artifacts from the mansion suggest that Blackwood may have attempted to harness such beliefs systematically, integrating them into the very architecture of his home. The mirrors were nailed face down not simply to suppress reflection, but perhaps to prevent the escape or interference of forces he believed were contained within the glass. Investigators also examined the mansion's historical records of disappearances and psychological disturbances, searching for correlations between the mirror's placement and reported phenomena. A remarkable consistency emerged: incidents of extreme fear, hallucinations, and vanishing occurred most frequently in rooms where mirrors occupied strategic positions, directly facing doorways, aligned with staircases, or reflecting multiple angles of the same space. This pattern suggests deliberate intention, a design that transcended mere superstition and entered the realm of precise psychological engineering. Blackwood, whether consciously or unconsciously, had created a laboratory of fear, where human perception became both the subject and the instrument of study. The mansion's mirrors also reveal a curious interaction with memory and suggestion. Visitors frequently reported encountering images of people they knew, moments from their past, or distorted reflections of themselves that conveyed emotions they were unwilling or unable to acknowledge. Psychologists argue that this may be a form of induced hallucination, where environmental cues and personal fears trigger vivid mental projections. Yet the consistency of certain phenomena, figures appearing to move independently, shadows defying logical light sources, and whispers captured on recording devices, suggests that something more may be at play, a mechanism that fuses the psychological and possibly the metaphysical. Local folklore reinforces this interpretation. Stories passed down through generations often describe the mansion as a living entity, a conscious observer that reacts to intruders, amplifies fear, and records their experiences within the mirrors. While folkloric accounts are anecdotal, their consistency over more than a century points to a cultural acknowledgement of the mansion's unique influence. The combination of folklore, psychological study, architectural analysis, and historical context forms a multi-layered puzzle, one that continues to defy simple explanation. The mansion, in essence, represents a convergence of human obsession, grief, and ingenuity. Edward Blackwood's personal history provides the emotional and intellectual framework, the mirrors supply the tools, and the architecture structures the environment. Together, they create a dynamic system capable of producing phenomena that challenge rational explanation. Each layer, psychological, historical, architectural, and folkloric, interacts with the others, resulting in an experience that is at once terrifying, fascinating, and uniquely enigmatic. Even today, those who enter the mansion report lingering effects long after leaving. Anxiety, heightened perception, and the unsettling sensation of being watched endure, suggesting that the mansion's influence extends beyond the physical boundaries of its walls. Some researchers hypothesize that this is the mansion's ultimate achievement, to imprint its history, obsessions, and fears onto those who experience it, making each visitor a part of its narrative. The mirrors, carefully placed and meticulously maintained, act as the vessels through which this influence is perpetuated, preserving Blackwood's vision across generations. As the puzzle continues to be unraveled, one question persists above all others: was Edward Blackwood a man driven by grief and curiosity, a meticulous observer of human psychology, or was he attempting something far darker, exploiting the very essence of perception itself? The evidence allows for multiple interpretations, each as unsettling as the last. What is certain is that the mansion, with its mirrors, remains a place where fear is not incidental but central, where human understanding is challenged, and where the boundary between observer and observed is irreversibly blurred. With the dawn of modern technology, the mansion and its mirrors attracted a new wave of investigators, equipped with tools far beyond what early researchers could have imagined. Thermal cameras, night vision equipment, electromagnetic field detectors, and high-resolution video cameras became standard, allowing investigators to document phenomena in ways previously impossible. Yet even with these advancements, the mansion continued to defy explanation, demonstrating that technology could measure some aspects of its environment but could not fully capture the psychological and possibly supernatural forces at play. One of the earliest modern investigations involved a team of paranormal researchers intent on validating the mansion's reputation. They set up a series of cameras in key locations, particularly around mirrors in the West Wing and the Grand Hall, where the most consistent anomalies had been reported. Over the course of several nights, the footage revealed disturbing phenomena, shadows that appeared to move independently of any physical source, reflective distortions in mirrors that seemed to shift when no one was present, and intermittent flickers of light seemingly following invisible figures. Audio recorders captured low-frequency hums and occasional whispers that investigators could not attribute to environmental causes. While skeptics argued technical interference or environmental noise, the consistency across multiple nights and equipment types made such explanations increasingly difficult to accept. Thermal imaging added another layer of intrigue. Investigators noted temperature fluctuations that could not be explained by drafts or standard heating patterns. Certain rooms remained inexplicably cold, particularly in the vicinity of large mirrors, while others exhibited sudden bursts of heat. These shifts often corresponded with reported sightings of shadowy figures or unusual reflections, suggesting a connection between the mansion's physical environment and the psychological experiences of those present. Some researchers theorized that the mirrors might act as focal points, concentrating electromagnetic or thermal energy in ways that amplified perception and fear. High-resolution cameras captured phenomena that defied conventional physics. In one recording, a mirror appeared to display a figure that was not in the room at the time of filming. When investigators reviewed the footage frame by frame, the figure seemed to move subtly, interacting with the environment in ways that suggested awareness. In another instance, reflections of investigators appeared distorted, elongating or twisting in impossible directions. Such anomalies persisted despite repeated calibrations and controlled conditions, leaving both skeptics and believers questioning the boundaries of perception within the mansion. The use of motion sensors further revealed unusual activity. Hallways triggered alerts when no one was present, and some mirrors appeared to create reflections of movement that did not correspond to any person in the room. Investigators hypothesized that the mirrors might somehow record prior activity, replaying it as visual echoes. Each visitor experiences a slightly different reality, influenced by personal fears, expectations, and susceptibility to suggestion. Yet the patterns are unmistakable: heightened anxiety, disorientation, and encounters with inexplicable visual or auditory phenomena are consistent. The mansion is, in essence, a living experiment in perception, a repository of obsession and fear, and a site where the boundaries between reality and reflection are deliberately obscured. As night falls and the mansion's halls darken, the mirrors continue to dominate, their presence a silent warning to all who enter. For those who have studied, investigated, or simply dared to visit, the estate represents both a challenge and a testament to human curiosity. It is a place where history, psychology, and the inexplicable converge, where every reflection may conceal a secret, and where the past's echoes continue to shape the present. The mansion's haunting legacy is not confined to stories, it is an enduring force, a reflection of Edward Blackwood's obsession, and a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be fully understood. In the end, the mansion persists as it always has, a monument to fear, fascination, and the unknowable. Its mirrors, nailed to walls or defying explanation, stand as silent witnesses, preserving the history of those who have walked its halls and the legends that will continue to grow with each new visitor. The question remains, who dares to look, and what will they see reflected back? For every mirror in the mansion holds a fragment of the past, a whisper of terror, and a promise that its mysteries will endure far beyond the present, captivating, unsettling, and haunting all who cross its threshold. While the mechanism remained unknown, these occurrences reinforced the notion that the mansion itself was an active participant, capable of influencing the perception of reality in a measurable, repeatable way. Modern psychological analysis accompanied the technological investigation. Participants were monitored for physiological responses, heart rate, skin conductance, and pupil dilation. Many exhibited significant changes when near mirrors, particularly those in historically active rooms. These reactions were consistent across individuals with varying levels of belief in the paranormal, suggesting that the mansion's influence transcended mere suggestion. Fear, once considered a subjective response, was quantified, showing that the environment itself, through architecture, light, and reflective surfaces, could provoke profound, measurable psychological effects. Some investigators attempted to manipulate conditions to isolate variables. Mirrors were covered or moved, yet the mansion's effects persisted. Shadows appeared even in unmirrored rooms, whispers continued, and anomalies were recorded in areas previously considered inactive. This suggested that while mirrors were central to the mansion's phenomena, they were part of a broader system, a combination of psychological triggers, architectural design, and perhaps an inexplicable force. The mansion, it seemed, had evolved into a multidimensional environment where human perception, fear, and expectation were inseparable from the physical space itself. Historical research accompanied these modern studies, linking current observations with past events. Disappearances, hallucinations, and psychological disturbances followed consistent patterns over more than a century. Rooms and mirrors implicated in early 20th century incidents continued to display anomalies in the 21st century. This continuity reinforced the idea that the mansion was more than a backdrop for human activity, it was an enduring agent in the events it had hosted, a persistent influence across generations. Despite technological advancements, the mansion retained its power to surprise and unsettle. Investigators reported experiences that defied equipment, moments where subjective perception overtook objective measurement. A researcher described stepping into a room with multiple mirrors only to see fleeting images of people who had lived and vanished decades earlier. Another felt a shadow press close, a sensation that no sensor could detect but which left a lasting mark on his awareness. These events blurred the line between empirical investigation and personal experience, underscoring that the mansion's mysteries could not be fully contained by cameras or machines. Modern investigations confirmed one undeniable truth: the mirrors are not passive. They interact with light, space, and human perception in ways that remain poorly understood, and they amplify the mansion's pervasive atmosphere of dread. The combination of historical precedent, technological observation, and psychological analysis forms a compelling narrative, one that positions the mansion as both a subject of study and an active participant in its own legend. For anyone who enters today, the warning remains clear: the mansion observes, the mirrors record, and the consequences of prolonged exposure may extend beyond immediate fear, leaving traces in memory, perception, and perhaps even the very soul of the observer. Today, the mansion stands as a silent sentinel over the surrounding landscape, its decaying walls and boarded windows concealing a century of obsession, fear, and unanswered questions. Those centuries have passed since Edward Blackwood walked its halls. The estate continues to attract attention from historians, paranormal investigators, and curious visitors drawn by the legend of its mirrors. Despite warnings, the mansion's magnetic presence persists, compelling people to cross its threshold, compelled by a mixture of fascination, dread, and an irresistible urge to understand the inexplicable. Modern visitors often describe the mansion as frozen in time. Dust blankets ornate furniture, cobwebs stretch across chandeliers, and mirrors remain nailed face down, their reflective surfaces obscured yet unmistakably present. Every creak of the floorboards, every shifting shadow, feels amplified, as though the house itself is aware of every step, every breath. The atmosphere is thick with memory, past events, recorded in the walls and mirrors, linger like a tangible fog, pressing on the psyche of those who enter. The mansion is not merely a building, it is a living archive of terror and obsession, one that continues to exert influence long after the last human has departed. The mirrors, as ever, remain central to the mansion's mystique. Covered, obscured, or unobserved, they dominate every room, shaping perception and provoking subtle unease. Visitors report an uncanny sense of being watched, even when no mirror reflects their image. Some claim to see fleeting glimpses of figures in the periphery of their vision, shapes that vanish the moment they turn to confront them. Others describe sensations of intense cold near the mirrors or hear faint whispers echoing from empty rooms. These experiences are consistent across decades, suggesting that the mirrors are not merely objects but catalysts for a phenomenon that transcends the ordinary. Paranormal investigators continue to study the mansion, employing the latest technology to document its activity. High-definition cameras, infrared sensors, and electromagnetic field detectors capture anomalies similar to those reported in earlier decades, shadows that move independently of known sources, distorted reflections, and faint, disembodied sounds. Thermal imaging reveals cold spots near mirrors and sudden, localized temperature fluctuations. Yet, despite these tools, many investigators acknowledge that the mansion eludes full explanation. What is observed, measured, and recorded is only a fragment of a larger, more enigmatic reality, one that continues to challenge the limits of human understanding. Local lore remains deeply entwined with the mansion's modern identity. Residents speak of the estate with reverence and fear, recounting tales of vanished visitors, unexplained sounds, and mirrors that seem to interact with the living. Some assert that the mansion preserves the essence of those who once inhabited it, storing fragments of memory, emotion, and consciousness within its walls and reflective surfaces. These stories, passed down through generations, maintain the estate's status as a place of cultural as well as historical fascination. To locals, the mansion is a warning, a challenge, and a testament to the power of human obsession. The mansion's reputation has also permeated popular culture. Documentaries, books, and podcasts have explored its history, weaving the narrative of Edward Blackwood, the mirrors, and the inexplicable events that occurred within its walls. Each retelling introduces a new audience to the estate, perpetuating its legend while reinforcing its aura of mystery. Yet despite widespread attention, the mansion retains its secrets. Every investigation uncovers new questions, and every attempt to explain the phenomena encounters limitations imposed by the very nature of the estate itself. The mirrors, unyielding and inscrutable, guard these answers jealously, reflecting only what they choose to reveal. Modern visitors describe experiences that echo those of the past. A historian recently recounted walking through the West Wing and feeling a sudden, inexplicable pressure, as if invisible eyes were examining every movement. Another visitor described glimpsing her reflection in a mirror, only to see a version of herself twisted in fear and anguish, a reflection that vanished when she tried to focus. Even experienced paranormal investigators report moments of disorientation, heightened anxiety, and vivid hallucinations, suggesting that the mansion continues to manipulate perception, regardless of skepticism or preparation. Psychologists studying the mansion emphasize its unique capacity to exploit human cognition. Fear, suggestion, and expectation converge within the architectural design and reflective surfaces, producing experiences that are both subjective and, in many cases, objectively observable. Mirrors act as focal points, amplifying the mind's natural tendency to detect patterns, faces, and movement, yet the sheer consistency and intensity of these phenomena suggest that the mansion exerts influence beyond conventional explanation. It is a rare environment where human perception, history, and architecture intersect, creating an enduring psychological and cultural enigma. The mansion's haunting legacy also raises questions about the nature of memory, history, and fear. Visitors often report lingering sensations long after leaving, a residual echo of the mansion's influence. Dreams of distorted reflections, fleeting shadows, and whispers from unseen sources are common, reinforcing the idea that the estate's effects extend beyond its physical boundaries. The mirrors, in particular, seem to act as vessels, preserving fragments of the past and replaying them for those who dare to observe. In this way, the mansion functions not only as a location but as an active participant in a narrative that continues to unfold across generations. Despite extensive study, the mansion remains fundamentally unknowable. Its mirrors, architecture, and accumulated history form a complex system that challenges attempts at definitive understanding. Each visitor experiences a slightly different reality, influenced by personal fears, expectations, and susceptibility to suggestion. Yet the patterns are unmistakable: heightened anxiety, disorientation, and encounters with inexplicable visual or auditory phenomena are consistent. The mansion is, in essence, a living experiment in perception, a repository of obsession and fear, and a site where the boundaries between reality and reflection are deliberately obscured. As night falls and the mansion's halls darken, the mirrors continue to dominate, their presence a silent warning to all who enter. For those who have studied, investigated, or simply dared to visit, the estate represents both a challenge and a testament to human curiosity. It is a place where history, psychology, and the inexplicable converge, where every reflection may conceal a secret, and where the past's echoes continue to shape the present. The mansion's haunting legacy is not confined to stories, it is an enduring force, a reflection of Edward Blackwood's obsession, and a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be fully understood. In the end, the mansion persists as it always has, a monument to fear, fascination, and the unknowable. Its mirrors, nailed to walls or defying explanation, stand as silent witnesses, preserving the history of those who have walked its halls and the legends that will continue to grow with each new visitor. The question remains, who dares to look, and what will they see reflected back? For every mirror in the mansion holds a fragment of the past, a whisper of terror, and a promise that its mysteries will endure far beyond the present, captivating, unsettling, and haunting all who cross its threshold.